All right, next up, we will have the peer-to-peer sharing about cancer screening in Indian country with our facilitators, Melissa Buffalo and Chris Rhodes, who are both from the American Indian Cancer Foundation.
Hi. Can you hear me? That's what we always got to start now with our webinars. Yes? Okay.
Hear you.
I'm Melissa Buffalo, Imachiapie. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Melissa Buffalo, Deputy Director here at the American Indian Cancer Foundation. I am an enrolled member of the Meskwaki Nation in Iowa. I'm also Dakota with the Crow Creek and Lower Brosu tribes. So happy to be here today and kind of hearing some of the conversations and hearing the really good conversations we had just now. Super excited to share this space with all of you, with the attendees, with the panelists, our hosts, the Prevent Cancer Foundation, and again with Chris, our CEO here at ACAF. I'm super honored to do this work and to be here again today. I know we're all here to really discuss some great topics, and again, just kind of looking at those cancer burdens that impact Indian country and our loved ones.
Thank you, Melissa. It's fun to be able to be with you in this presentation. We've been working from home separately for so long, and it's important to stay physically distant. Prevent Cancer Foundation has had an amazing dialogue for years now, and it's been fun to be a part of those conversations. And for any of you who have attended the Indian Country Sharing Session, you've seen it grow. We sit in a circle, and that circle keeps getting bigger and bigger. That we need a bigger room every year, it seems. And this year we're sitting in a circle all across the world, it seems, and with 431 people. So good thing we're not in one room. This does get to expand our conversation. But this really is an opportunity for us to have conversation. And we've done a lot of listening this afternoon, and we're excited to chat more.
Yeah. So just a few housekeeping before we kind of get into these deeper, amazing conversations. So again, the chat feature will be disabled during this segment, and we'll be using the same format as the Q&A session earlier. You can use the raise hand feature located at the bottom of your screen to indicate you have a question or comment, and we will enable the audio so you can speak, or you can ask a question and comment in the Q&A text feature, also located at the bottom of your screen. Please include the speaker's name to whom your question is directed. We will go to raised hands first for your input, and then to the Q&A text. Again, to encourage the conversation, we will not cut you off as soon as you ask your question, but instead allow you to have dialogue with the panelists before moving on and one another. In one way or another, we're really trying to get to all of your questions. I think they've been doing a really good job at that thus far. And then also, as soon as this information sharing meeting in the peer-to-peer, we will have a SurveyMonkey poll in your email box so that you can vote kind of on some of those top strategies that we're discussing in this conversation.
I think we also may be adding some polling questions. So a pop-up window may appear on your screen allowing you to choose an answer. We'll see if that happens here in the near future. But anyways, we're really excited to get to the questions. And our panelists did such a nice job this morning giving you the groundwork for the complex American Indian health system, the health system that serves our people, and talked about what the population looks like and how we all fit together. And so I think we're really set to move on and get into this conversation. So when we think about, we share that the American Indian Cancer Foundation is focused on addressing access to quality cancer prevention, screening, treatment, survivor, and support. Just like so many of you are here today to do that, we aim to lift up and identify Indigenous solutions, build capacity, and raise awareness with a focus on eliminating cancer burdens with Native people. And so the first question today is, what are some of the strategies that are showing success to increase cancer screening among Native people in your area? We heard Tinka this morning talk about some amazing programs happening across the Northern Plains. This is really an opportunity again to share more resources and questions. So if we have some raised hands, we'd like to really hear more about how that looks in your area.
Looks like we have a raised hand from Lydia. Please unmute your microphone so we can hear you ask your question. Lydia, you'll have to unmute your own microphone. We will move on to Tapati. Please unmute your microphone so we can hear you ask your question.
Am I audible? Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Hi. So I am Tapati, and I am an assistant professor at the Fort Lewis College, where many of you might be knowing that most of the students we cater to come from Native American populations and other indigenous and rural populations. My background has been public health, and I have been working with various indigenous and rural populations across Africa and in India. Given that, my question is apparently two-pronged. One is, how do you start building critical thinking and intercultural humility among students about interventions, about the knowledge which exists, about the challenges which exist from an early age, so that that in itself becomes an early detector, or as they say, that knowledge in itself is prevention to various kinds of cancers, because that would be sensitization.
Really good question. Melissa, you want to, or you?
Yeah, well, she said two questions, so I was like,
okay.
Yeah, so when I think about
so I think, yeah, the second part is kind of related. It is built on the intercultural humility, because I have been lucky enough to have served various communities at various points in time. People who do not get that opportunity, first-hand opportunity, how do you build on that intercultural humility? Because I understand there's so much of knowledge, so much of resilience lying out there, which if we can tap even in our interventions, in our health communications, we can do much better.
Mm-hmm. So the first one I think was kind of working with some of the college students and looking at those interventions that weave in cultural humility and thinking about those challenges. So hopefully,
how do you make them sensitive towards this world, even before they are exposed to or they are affected? How do you build that sensitivity? As an academician, I am really intrigued to know that.
My first thought is time, as we think about the time it takes to get to know communities. And we know, I think Chris mentioned it earlier, that there's over 500 federally recognized tribes, each with their own unique language, culture, history. So knowing that what they learn where you're located is going to be completely different from California or Minnesota. So that it's so important to really take into consideration the cultural ways within each tribal nation. And to build those relationships takes time. We know that through the work I do here at ACAF, to my previous role with research, like those relationships really take time with the community members.
Mm-hmm.
I'll let Chris add.
I do want to add a little bit, just to say, cultural humility really is tough. And especially if you weren't raised in an area where we see lots of different cultures or more than one culture, to be able to understand the nuances and the differences. And so when you have students that come to the college setting, I think it's really the exposing folks to different ways of thinking and different ways of being, and to allow them to really explore their own culture. And I think it's can be tough sometimes in America, where a lot of folks don't think about culture and just go through the world as we're all in one big melting pot. But in reality, we each do have our own cultures, and we have family, and we have foods, and we have traditions, and really getting people to think about those things is really a start to learning how to understand other people's cultures.
Yep.
Thank you.
Did that answer the second part as well, as we think about those interventions and the resiliency?
Yeah, kind of. Like, I come from the same intervention world, and now the challenge which I face is, how do I make students look at the other side of the world, connect with it's not just that it exists, but that the interconnectivity is something which I feel very challenged with, that there are indigenous populations here, there, and everywhere. There are rural populations here, there, and everywhere. And how do you compare ruralities? How do you compare this, the indigenousness or resiliencies across various populations, across various communities? So that is something where I feel very challenged. And it is not just pockets of interventions. I've seen various such pockets of interventions thereafter falling out or not being sustainable, either because the communities are not accepting them. There is some kind of a traditional knowledge vis-a-vis a Western knowledge, kind of a distrust, and those aspects being there. And the second part is fund crunches and policies not being responsive. So that is where I feel that it is not just sensitizing populations about similarities and differences of different indigenous populations across maybe different countries and communities, but also because that has a huge bearing with funding, with policies, with how sustainable our programs are also. So yeah, I don't know if it made any sense.
It makes a lot of sense, and it's such a big issue. I feel like we could talk about that all afternoon. I'd love to schedule another time to chat with you.
Yeah, sure.
I think it looks like Jasmine's ready to post the polls. So there are going to be 3 questions on your screen, and you'll be able to respond to them. And once you respond, you'll see the results. I think it's open just for a little bit more, and we'll see the results come up. But really will describe the audience that we have today, where you're coming from in terms of experience, areas of the country, and I forgot the other one, Melissa. What is the other? Oh, how familiar are you? First one. think while we're waiting, I'll also set up the next question. So there are many people from mainstream healthcare and advocacy organizations on the call. And in what ways can these orgs best work with tribal and urban indigenous populations? We'd love to hear some ideas about where we've seen some successes. And you, again, can use the raised hand feature or the Q&A. And we'll get to that discussion as soon as we see the poll results. Here we go. So we see how familiar are you with American Indian Alaska Native Health? We have just about half that are somewhat familiar or very familiar, and with other folks with about half that are not very familiar or not at all familiar. So glad to be on the call and encourage those people that are very familiar and somewhat familiar to share and about what works in the communities, and also see the regions that folks live. And we have representation from all across the US and even across in other parts of the world. And so when we look at
our work cut out for us, so we can make these folks familiar by the end, and that this somehow becomes part of their work.
Right. Obviously, people are here because they're interested and want to learn more. So here we go. Again, if there's a raised hand. And again, the question was, what are some of the strategies for success from tribal or mainstream partners in working with these populations to improve cancer outcomes?
All right, we have a raised hand from Irene. Please unmute your microphone so we can hear you speak.
Hello, are you there?
We can hear you.
This is Irene, and
Hi.
I'm from the West Coast. And our program is 16 counties of California. Hard to reach rural areas for native population for cervical and cancer screenings. And often I travel, or my boss travels at different times, but the outreach to the community is, they prefer that I'm native, but I do travel to the counties, and outreach there is very difficult at times because of the lack of education, possibly. Transportation is another. They only come to the events because maybe their families have traveled to an event. I do a booth, and I do outreach to a lot of Native women who may not want the information. Trust is key. They recognize me right away because I've done this for probably 14 years. In the northern part of California, and often I run across they don't have access to the health centers or tribal health. They often have to travel, and why we don't have traveling buses, or I'm not sure what you call them, but I know money is a big part of it too, but it seems like it would be so much easier for women to go to this lab or the bus and to get their mammograms rather than travel so far. Again, I had a mom that passed from cancer, colon rectal cancer, and a sister that passed from cancer as well, but at the age of 53. But she lived on the reservation. That was lack of access right there in itself. And of course, my mother being aged, she lived a long time, but she still passed from colorectal, but was a survivor for, 25 years. And she had access to care. My sister currently has breast cancer, but she's a survivor of probably 12 years now. Again, access to care was another big factor. Fear and trust of doctors. So that's why I'm an advocate for women, and I want them to be educated, to get their mammograms, to get the word out to the Native country that this is important. We don't want our Native women to be passing from the cancers that exist today, that are, especially in the rural areas.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I've been doing it for close to 14, 15 years now, and it seems it's been a battle. It's gotten better over time because education, I think, is key as well. And the programs that are out there want classrooms as a setting, and to give the knowledge in a classroom setting as well. But I think when I go out to the community, I do one-on-one outreach to each, or I try to, and I think that works better for me because I can actually talk to that person, because they recognize who I am as I travel in the different counties. And they see my booth and they say, "Hey, I remember you. What do you have today?" Or their approach is, they know me. I build the trust with them, and I can only do that.
Irene, thank you for sharing. You're one of those superheroes out there. You are making a difference. Having people from the community doing the education is absolutely key. And you're talking about some of those structural barriers that we talked about earlier with Tinka. Really key to being able to change these outcomes in our communities.
And she mentioned, I forgot her name, but she mentioned, can you hear me?
Yes.
Reaching college students and the younger population, as far as getting them to, currently I have an intern that I work with, and she's ready to graduate. She's fresh. She's excited to get out into the world, but she really, really wants to know how the Native, the culture, and that's where she's going. She's going for her master's, but she really, truly, in her heart, wants to work with the Native people. That's her goal. She's an anthropologist, and I told her she works with me in my office, and she actually is so, I don't want to use the wrong word, naive, but she's got open eyes, open ears. And I always tell her, build your trust with your clientele in your future. Build the trust. Don't just go out there and say you're going to conquer the world, but I think she'll go far. She's going for her master's, going to the Southwest where she wants to work with the Native people. And I think she right now is fresh out of the boat, and she will. I've been trying to give her information about Native culture, the medicine wheel, the differences between the Native people and the white population. I've given her different materials to reference, and she still comes back with this mystical, because I want her to write papers on what I've given her from a tribal perspective, and her worldview. And she has come back and said, I read this mystical book and it was so neat. And I'm just so fascinated with the Native culture. Well, it's not all about mysticism. It was hard. It's hard for me to reach her as far as whatever resources I give her. She's fascinated with it, but yet at the same time, she's not able to grasp where I'm coming from a native, as a native, and her native perspective. And for me to guide her through that process, I hope she will grasp it as she reaches into her master's program in the fall. And of course, due to COVID, everything's done online now, so it's rather difficult for a student that's coming out of college and wants to connect with the community and work with Native people, because we do need those experts, those professionals in our tribal government, our tribal, in order to find where to go in this world for her, in her major. She wants to be an anthropologist, but at the same time, I've introduced to her to a variety of people, but due to COVID, it kind of cut everything short. But like I said, even for a Native student to come into the program too, I work with college students, so I do college prep, and often our Native students, tribal students, may want to venture outside the box and not, I hate to say it, but not come back into the community because of whatever reason. Could be better wages, maybe they found that city or town more attractive. I do live in a rural town, so the attraction outside our reservation, people tend to move away because, I'm going to move here because there's more resources, more a community that fits them. And maybe money, that could be factored into it too as well. So we want Native teachers in the community, whether it be through health or health, especially in the health field too. They tend to move away, which is kind of too bad, but that's the reality. And teachers that work within the smaller districts, that's where we need to retain our Native people.
Thank you for sharing, Irene. You bring valuable insight into these conversations.
All right, we have a raised hand from Patricia. Please unmute your microphone so we can hear you speak.
First of all, I want to say hi, Irene. This is Patty from Everwomen Counts. Mm-hmm. And I want you to know that you do valuable work, and it has been a pleasure working with you in the past. However, now I'm retired. But I would like to say that Irene is a very wonderful resource for the Everwomen Counts program that I was with. I'm now retired, RN, and I came from the clinical perspective, whereas Irene worked with us as a health educator and still does, I'm sure. And one of the things that we were able to do in our region, and the region that we work in is Northern California, rural community from Butte County up to the Oregon border, and it includes the coast, Humboldt County, and it's all rural. I mean, 98% rural. We even have some that are considered pioneer. So very small communities. So what works there would not probably work for a more urban area. But we have had some successes locally in the Chico, the Butte, and the Glenn County area through the Everwomen Counts program. Everwomen Counts is the portion of the National Breast and Cervical Cancer Detection Program. In California, it is called Everwomen Counts. So it's where there's federal and state money to provide free breast and cervical cancer screening, detection, and treatment. And the program that we started with was a grant through Susan Komen Foundation. And that grant was obtained by our contractor, which is a nonprofit called the California Health Collaborative. And we obtained a grant to work specifically with Native American population, and it was called A Voice for a Change. And the goal was to try to recognize and utilize the cultural aspects of the Native American individuals to help increase their trust and education regarding breast cancer and cervical cancer screening. So the grant actually entailed a 2-year period. And the goal was to first try to educate them, gain awareness from them of how they best learn and what works best within, their culture. And so we used what we called talking circles, and we worked in conjunction with a specific group of clinics called the Northern Valley Indian Health Clinics. And so these are individuals that were already patients of theirs, so they already were receiving health care. However, the head of the clinics were concerned because their screening rates for breast cancer were in the single digits. And they knew they needed to bring them up and wanted to bring them up, and they weren't sure how. So what we did was we first did this 2-year program of educating with these talking circles. We had a Native American artist partake in that, and the classes were 2 hours, and it was free, and there was a limit for each class so that there'd be enough time. So I think it was like 10 women. And when they came, they received an hour of education followed by an hour of learning how to make Native American, their ceremonial jewelry. And so the first hour, and so we kind of used that to educate them that if you want to learn how to do this, we want to give you some education in the process. And our goal was to at least get 2 people to go for mammograms that were eligible age-wise and eligible financially because they qualified for the Everwomen Counts program, which is based on 200% of the federal poverty level. And so basically, we did reach that goal. And what happened was that the clinics themselves decided that they wanted to take it on. So now every 6 months, and Irene is one of our basic people that often goes to these breast screening days and educates the women and brings information, and she's wonderful, and they all relate to her. And it's for me, as a non-native, but a very cultural person with my Italian culture, every time I've been involved, it's just warmed my heart because I see how the interaction between the Native American women has worked to encourage each other. And the day is like, to me, it's like a celebration of their culture. We have gotten a local mammogram facility to agree to block out an afternoon. It starts out with a catered lunch, and then throughout the day, the women can have speakers. We've had women that were diagnosed with breast cancer through our program that are Native American that get up and speak. We have women who've lost relatives to breast cancer who never had screening or had late detection who get up and encourage the other women. And very early in the process, I think after like the second year, we had a diagnosis, and that woman now is very prominent in encouraging other women to participate. But this occurs twice a year. They do it in October for breast cancer awareness month, and then again they do it in the spring. And like I said, the women come, and they transportation is provided, so they're bused to the area. They're provided a nutritious meal. They have speakers that are culturally appropriate, and they get to make pillows and Native American necklaces and share their stories with each other. And the rates have increased up to over 50%. It's been a period of probably close to 10 years. But it's, again, very rural community, and I don't know that would work in an urban setting. But for this particular clinic, it's made it's been very successful. And one of the ladies who was in charge of one of the educational programs at the clinic has now moved to another Native American clinic up in Humboldt County. And last year, we reintroduced that concept at her clinic. It was the same idea. We held a mammogram day. There were speakers. There were games. There were, different things they could participate in. And the women themselves have become more and more involved and taken over part of it. So that's just an example of what can be done, but I don't know how we could replicate it. It's just one of those things that there were key people who really wanted it to happen, were really interested, and had the ability to connect. And we always had the Native American community in the center of it, helping to organize it and be involved with it and encourage their patients to participate.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that, there are opportunities where some of this work's been, similar in urban and rural, and very rural, as we look at some of our Northern Plains tribes. But I think of some of our pink shawl projects that have been done in other tribal communities that really rely on that resiliency and that culture and kind of weaving in some of those things. So I think that's a conversation to try and continue with some of these other fundings, or how we can work with Susan G. Komen to share those different events that happen to be replicated or duplicated in other communities. And teamwork, you both described the teamwork needed between the community and the clinic.
All right, looks like we have another raised hand. Please unmute your microphone so we can hear you speak. You will have to unmute your own microphone.
Hello. Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Can hear you.
Yes. I personally congratulate you all for conducting such a wonderful webinar today. I'm Dr. Arjun Shinde, working for Indian Cancer Society, Mumbai, India. I'm just looking after the cancer screening department. So let me share something in short. We have cancer screening programs for cervical cancer, breast cancer, and oral cancers. Recently, we did one sponsored program from AstraZeneca, and that is for women-centric. And in that, we do like for cervical cancer, we do pap smear, VIA technique, and and pelvic examination. And for for breast cancer, we do clinical breast examination and mammography for 45 age and above. And also the woman who gets suspicious after clinical breast examination, we go for the mammography. And for oral cancer, we do visual oral examination, and if possible we go for the breast cytology if find any suspicious. For any suspicious or suspected cases, we send them to the preventive oncology for any nearby cancer institute. In Mumbai, we have Tata Memorial Hospital, and each part of the like each part we have a district hospitals connected. We have a cancer institutes. So I have one question today's webinar. Now there is a COVID-19 pandemic. What will be the scenario for community-based cancer screening program? I am very much eager to know how we go for that after this pandemic of COVID-19. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. I think that actually, I don't know that we have that answer as we're all in this pandemic right now. And I think as we look at some of our funding, whether it's state, federal, and how we're transitioning and pivoting to respond to COVID as we think about the importance of screening. So I think that's an ongoing conversation that we're having with our tribal communities and our funders of how we can support cancer screenings, but also being aware of the impacts of COVID-19 on our cancer, on those that are immunocompromised, excuse me. Chris, do you want to add anything? We can kind of maybe transition into COVID and have another question and conversation. Okay. So I've mentioned too, at ACAP, we are very concerned about the impact of COVID-19 and the impact in tribal nations, because we know it's the perfect storm in terms of morbidity and mortality among our elders, people with chronic health conditions, and overcrowded living conditions. Since March, our staff have been hosting cancer and COVID webinars with various folks from around Indian country as they've shared their perspectives on kind of well-being, how they're physical distancing but remaining socially connected. And again, what the importance of culture that plays into this. And again, just that overall health and wellness in keeping our loved ones safe. So you can find some of our information on our cancer and COVID webinars. We actually interviewed and spoke with Dr. Warren, who was on the call earlier, and some of our other relevant resources at www.aicaf.org. So I kind of one of the questions I wanted to ask, and hopefully we can get some sharing, in what ways has COVID impacted cancer outcomes among American Indian and Alaska Native people for some of the communities that you've worked with, or maybe some of the folks might have questions too on the call whose work is not directly related to Indian country.
As a reminder, the Q&A is open if you would like to text your question. We have a raised hand from Victoria. Please unmute your microphone so we can hear you speak.
Good afternoon. Can you all hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Hi, my name is Victoria. I am, I guess, the active one who was chatting all about cancer prevention dialogue or communication on the chat before the webinar started. And I've heard so many familiar voices during this webinar too. And one of them is Ms. Patricia. I just want to, I don't even know where to start what I want to say, but I first want to, thank you all who contributed all these strategies and experience in cancer prevention, this work field, no matter as health educator or contribute your experience dealing with cancer in the past. These are all good opportunities for all of us to learn and to be more compassionate and sympathized for those clients we are going to get connected to in the future. And for today's topic regarding connect to tribal nations or Indian countries, I think it's definitely very important because there are so many rural areas and difficulties we all face in cancer prevention for the Native Americans. So I was gonna ask, there was a college professor was on the question, and asking a question or telling us about her intern just now, and also with Miss Patricia. They all sounds like very experienced and very nurturing tutors. And they are our treasures in this field in cancer prevention because for that college professor, apparently she's already one of the members in a tribe or a Indian nation. She's already, in the field and no longer need us to convince her about we can talk about this topic. So for programs like us, it would be such a valuable asset if we have someone like her and working with cancer prevention promotion and education in the communities, especially in the tribal nations. And also for the lady, I didn't catch her name, she was asking about how to teach her students to be considerate and compassionate about what's happening on the other side of the globe. I think it's definitely a bigger issue to be talked about in the education models and education field. But what we can do is definitely just to present and try to use visual and all sort of aids to build a connection for these students. They're in for education, so we use all the education tools to help them make connection. Last, I guess I just want to give a shout out to you all for providing this wonderful webinar, and for you all who are in this prevent cancer this topic. No matter you are a patient before, or you are a health educator, or if you're just passionate about help underserved population get help in prevent cancer to no matter because you have family before that went through a hard time dealing with cancer, or for any reason, if you want to, let's get connected and let's stay connected, because there are so many programs like Ms. Patricia mentioned during the first webinar. She mentioned there is a genetic mapping program that's actually supported by CDC or a federal fund in California that can allow people who are eligible to go through cancer, like early detection screenings. That's something new that I have never heard in my state, which is Oklahoma State. Just for experience and valuable information like this, we can stay connected and we can learn from each other and just try to reach out to more people in the best way we can. I did post a link in the chat session for a Microsoft form to fill out some information if you want to get in touch and stay connected. In the future, I'm thinking just to keep prevent cancer conversation going. I know there is a LinkedIn group. The link is posted in the chat session as well by Jody Hoyos, which thank you for that. I didn't know about that, but I'll definitely check it out. But if you all are interested, maybe podcasts in the future, and for experience or stories told by the college professor just now and Miss Patricia, these are all good conversation that can be elaborated in like a podcast or where time is more relaxed, I guess. If you all are interested, please fill out that Microsoft form link or email me. My email is victoria.yan, Y-A-N as Nancy, at health.ok.gov. I work for the BCC EDP program in Oklahoma State Health Department. So if you are interested in get in touch and stay connected, please do that. And I look forward to getting to know you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria.
We have a raised hand from Irene. Please unmute your microphone so we can hear you speak.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is Irene again. I just wanted to do a shout out to my Patty. We've worked for years together, so I want to thank her for her comments and her contribution to breast cancer and cervical cancer. If she's still there, maybe not, but again, working in Native country has been an experience that's my passion. I advocate for every woman out there, no matter where they came from, to do their breast cancer mammography screenings. I just had one quick question. My coworker just got diagnosed with breast cancer, 2nd stage, and she went through her ritual every year screening, and she didn't have any lumps at the time. This was not too long ago, but anyway, by accident, she said she felt a little lump in her breast about the size of a gummy bear. And she, of course, went back to the doctor, did all types of, I think she even got to the point of an MRI and the other screenings that go with it. And nothing was detected until she kept pushing it. And she mentioned something about an invisible cancer. And through all that she's gone through over the past 2 months, what does that mean? I mean, nothing showed up. Everything, the end result is she went back and I guess the MRI showed, a small tumor and a node in her hip. But now she's going next week. She's just signed up for chemo. I mean, it happened so quickly. So what does she mean by that invisible cancer? I've never heard that term.
I also haven't heard that term, but I know there are a number of healthcare providers on the call, so maybe an answer could be posted in the Q&A section.
I know we have a few questions that also came in the Q&A as well, if we want to look at some of those.
Okay.
Chris Johnson has a question. What suggestions would you have for non-Indigenous folks who would like to expand their cancer prevention work to include tribal nations?
Do you want me to answer that? I think you can answer it.
I'll let you take this lead.
Well, Mr. Johnson, really the opportunities to work in tribal communities, again, start with educating yourself about what's going on in these communities, attending webinars like this today, but not letting it stop there and continuing to have those conversations. There are a lot of great programs out there now where you can learn more. Again, American Indian Cancer Foundation at AmericanIndianCancer.org There are also a number of resources. There's a new Indigenous Public Health program at the University of North Dakota that Dr. Don Warren has started. Again, it's about getting familiar with the community, and when you have opportunities to engage, to spend lots of time listening and learning. Thank you. Great question.
Yeah, I think you answered that well. I wouldn't add too much to it. Again, I think it's just finding those opportunities and those connections. And once you make one, I feel like it kind of keeps going. We do have one more question, I think. This one might be a good one because I know, are there any known podcasts around Native health topics and population health in Indian country? I love absorbing information via podcasts. ACAF just started our own podcast. I don't have the link. Chris, if you know it offhand. I know there's regional opportunities as well. Minnesota Native News. We just interviewed, 2 of our staff just interviewed. Yeah, I can look that up, Michael Brown, and get that information, or we could have maybe Prevent Cancer Foundation folks send out some of the podcasts, but great question.
We have another raised hand from Carolyn. Please unmute your microphone so we can hear you speak.
Hey everybody, this is Bo Aldeje, the CEO of Prevent Cancer, and I just wanted to, before we close this, thank everybody, thank all the speakers. Today's were just wonderful presentations, and I'd particularly like to thank Karen Peterson and Erica Childs Warner and Haley Berger and everybody, Adrian Hartness, everybody who was on the dialogue planning team. They work hard all year round, and I think that all their diligent efforts to reboot and pivot to a virtual event have really paid off, because they've been 3 excellent sessions. So thanks to all of you, and I just want to give you a big pat on the back.
Thank you for this exciting opportunity to engage folks and, again, raise visibility about the issues facing American Indians and Alaska Natives in tribal and urban communities. We have just a few moments left. Melissa, I don't know. I'm scared to open up another question at this point because we just have a few minutes. But I think perhaps we need to have another conversation sometime soon. Looking forward to that. And I know the great team at Prevent Cancer Foundation will already be working hard to plan the next great event. So if we want to do the last raised hands, I know that was a priority.
We have one more, we have time for one more question.
Okay.
Carolyn, please unmute your microphone so we can hear you speak.
Hello, can you hear me all right?
Yep.
I want to thank you for this wonderful webinar. I just posted a note in the Q&A, and I know the subject of mammographies come up quite a bit. And now I've been reviewing a lot of the research on this lately, and there's quite a bit of research also that discusses the potential harms of mammograms, and just how there is a lot of kind of, I think, parallels to prostate cancer, like that was discussed earlier, that there is a risk of finding something that might not necessarily be lethal, and then women undergoing invasive treatments in order to treat a precancerous tumor that wouldn't necessarily turn lethal down the road. And what I'm wondering is, it just seems particularly important with Native American communities that there is that trust and transparency as far as looking at potential treatments and understanding the potential harm, benefits and harms. And I'm wondering if you're aware of, I guess, one, whether that this knowledge is being discussed. I'm happy to post some citations in the Q&A if that would be helpful. And, if those conversations are happening, because I know often just in general, a lot of advertisements for cancer prevention screening programs, they don't quantify the benefits and harms. They really just don't address that at all. And so I'm just concerned people aren't necessarily making informed choices. They're just assuming this is a unquestionably, good thing to do.
Thank you for your input, Carolyn. Always an important point to make sure that we're making informed decisions. I think as we wrap up, I saw somebody's worried about the posters, and the posters are still happening. So do you want to start to close us out, Melissa?
Yep. Again, just big thanks to everyone, the Prevent Cancer Foundation, our attendees. We appreciate you. We're very thankful for this opportunity. So I just want to say, Kitabi Pilania Miigwech. Thank you.
So, and please remember to respond to the Survey Monkey that will be in your inbox after this conversation. And stay tuned. There's poster presentations coming your way that are really interesting.
It looks like we don't have any immediate questions. Kathleen, thank you so much for your interesting presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you all in attendance for joining us today. If your hand was up and didn't get your question answered live, please click on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and type your question, including to whom it's addressed. One way or another, we'll try to get your question answered. The webinar will be open for 5 additional minutes. Thank you again and enjoy the rest of your day.